You're stuck. Not in the way you were before, when everything felt impossible and you hadn't started. You've moved past that, but you're not where you want to be either. You're somewhere in the middle, in this strange twilight zone where progress feels real but painfully slow, where momentum exists but keeps threatening to collapse. This is the in-between phase, and it's where most people turn around and go back. The in-between phase is that stretch of time after the initial excitement wears off, but before tangible results arrive. You've been working on something for weeks, maybe months. The project, the skill, the transformation you committed to. Early on, there was energy. Novelty carried you forward. But now it's just work. Repetitive, uncertain work. You can't see the finish line yet, but you're too far in to pretend you're still at the beginning. Here's what makes this phase so dangerous. When you started, failure meant nothing. You had nothing to lose. But now you've invested time, effort, identity. You've told people what you're doing. You've reorganized your life around it. The stakes have quietly climbed while you weren't looking. And that weight makes turning back feel almost rational. At least going backward is familiar. Think about learning a language. The first week is thrilling. New sounds, new words, the rush of saying your first sentence. By month 3, you're drowning in verb conjugations that all blur together. You can't watch movies without subtitles yet. You can't have real conversations. You're in this agonizing gap where you're no longer a beginner, but nowhere near fluent. That's the in-between. Or building a business. Launch day feels like victory. You've got a website, a product, maybe your first few customers. Month 6, you're troubleshooting problems you didn't know existed. Revenue is inconsistent. Growth is slower than you projected. You're working harder than you ever did at your old job, but for less certainty. The gap between where you are and where you need to be seems wider now than it did at the start. The cruelest part is that the in-between phase doesn't announce itself. There's no marker that says, you are now entering the hardest part. It just creeps up. One day you wake up and realize the excitement is gone. What remains is the choice to continue or not. And suddenly, going back doesn't seem like failure. It seems like relief. Most motivational advice completely misses this. It focuses on starting or finishing. Just begin. Push through. But nobody talks about the long, grinding middle, where neither the thrill of beginning nor the satisfaction of completion exists. Just the work, just the doubt, just the temptation to call it a learning experience and move on. Your brain will offer you very reasonable sounding justifications. Maybe this wasn't the right path. Maybe you've learned enough. Maybe your time would be better spent on something else, something where you'd see faster results. These thoughts aren't irrational. They're your mind trying to protect you from wasted effort, from prolonged discomfort. But they're also the exact thoughts that prevent anyone from ever finishing anything meaningful. Because here's the truth nobody wants to hear. The in-between phase is not a bug. It's a feature. It's the filter. It's what separates people who want results from people who get them. Everyone experiences it. The entrepreneur, 6 months into building their company. The writer on page 150 of their manuscript. The athlete in their second year of training. The person trying to change their entire life trajectory. All of them hit this wall. The only difference is what they do when they reach it. What's happening beneath the surface during this phase is invisible, but critical. You're building infrastructure. The pianist's fingers are developing muscle memory. The entrepreneur is learning systems. The writer is finding their voice. None of this produces obvious external results yet, but it's absolutely necessary. You cannot skip the in-between. There is no shortcut that bypasses it. The only way out is through. And yet, going back feels so easy. You could stop today. No one would blame you. You tried. You gave it an honest effort. The world would move on. And so would you. That's the seduction. But here's what going back actually means. It means restarting the clock. It means that if you ever want to try again, you'll have to go through the early phases again. The awkward beginning, the slow build, and eventually, inevitably, you'll arrive right back here, right back in the in-between, facing the exact same choice. The people who make it through this phase don't have more talent. They don't have better circumstances. What they have is a simple, stubborn refusal to go backward. They understand something fundamental. The in-between phase is temporary. It feels permanent because you're in it, but it's not. Every single person who has ever achieved anything you admire went through their own version of this, and they kept going. So if you're there right now, in that frustrating gap between who you were and who you're becoming, understand what's really happening. You're not stuck. You're not failing. You're being tested. This is the part that determines whether the goal was real or just a passing interest. And the test isn't dramatic. There's no final boss battle, no climactic moment of truth. It's just today, and then tomorrow, and then the day after that. Choosing to continue when continuing feels pointless. Most people assume that commitment is a one-time decision. You decide to do something, and then you do it. But that's not how it works. Commitment is a choice you make repeatedly, sometimes hourly, to keep going when every rational part of you is calculating whether it's worth it. The in-between phase strips away all the romantic notions about pursuing goals. It reveals what you're actually made of, not your talent, not your intelligence, your capacity to tolerate discomfort without needing immediate proof that it's working. Here's what changes for people who push through. They stop measuring progress by results and start measuring it by consistency. Did I show up today? Yes, that's the win. The external markers will come, but they lag behind the internal work by weeks or months. You have to trust the process before you can see the process working. That's the paradox. You need faith in something you can't yet verify. And maybe that sounds abstract or philosophical, but it's intensely practical. Because the alternative is giving up every time you can't see immediate returns, which means giving up on basically everything that matters. Relationships, careers, health, creativity, all of it requires navigating long stretches where effort and outcome feel completely disconnected. Think about what you're actually learning during this phase. Even if it doesn't feel like learning, you're discovering your own patterns when you're most likely to quit. What excuses sound most convincing to you? What time of day your discipline weakens? These aren't failures, they're data. The people who succeed aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who recognize their struggle patterns and plan around them. You're also learning something more important, that you can feel unmotivated and still act. That inspiration is optional. This might be the most valuable skill anyone can develop. The ability to do what needs doing regardless of how you feel about it. Most people wait for motivation. High performers know it usually shows up after you start, not before. But let's be honest about what makes this so hard. You're surrounded by people who appear to be succeeding faster. Social media shows you their highlights. Your brain interprets this as evidence that you're behind, that you're doing it wrong, that maybe you should pivot to whatever they're doing. This comparison is poison. You're seeing their exterior while living in your interior. You feel every moment of your own doubt while only seeing their confident facade. It's not a fair comparison, and it will destroy you if you let it. The truth is, they're probably in their own version of the in-between too. They're just not posting about it. Nobody shares the boring middle. Nobody photographs the mundane Tuesday where nothing happens, except they didn't quit. But that's the day that actually matters. So what do? How do you actually get through this? You make the goal smaller, not the ultimate destination, but what counts as today's success. You can't control whether you'll be successful in 6 months. You can control whether you do the work today. Shrink the timeline until the goal becomes manageable, then do that, then do it again tomorrow. You also need to remember why you started, not in some vague, sentimental way. Specifically, what was the problem you were trying to solve? What future were you trying to build? Write it down if you have to, because in the middle, you'll forget. The day-to-day grind erases the big picture. You need something to remind you that this discomfort has a purpose. And finally, you have to accept that doubt doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Doubt is part of the path. It's supposed to be there. The people who look confident aren't free from doubt. They've just decided that doubt isn't a good enough reason to stop. They acknowledge it and continue anyway. That's the skill. The in-between phase will end, not because it magically resolves, but because you'll cross an invisible threshold. One day, you'll notice the work feels slightly easier. Your skills have caught up. The gap between effort and result starts closing, and you'll realize you made it through, not because you were special, but because you refused to go back. If you're reading this, and you're in the middle of something hard, something that feels stalled, something where going back seems tempting, know this. You're closer than you think. Not necessarily to the end, but to the breakthrough. The version of you that's capable of finishing this is being built right now. In this exact moment, through this exact struggle. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to not quit. That's the entire secret. Everything else is just noise. You're in it right now. The phase that filters out everyone who wasn't serious. The part where the only thing keeping you going is the decision not to go back. There's no dramatic revelation coming, just the quiet choice to continue. Make it today, then make it again tomorrow. That's how you get through.